Well, Michael, it's finally here. Eat your heart out, Heath Ledger, and Joaquin Phoenix. Jared Leto is back as the Joker in Zack Snyder's new Justice League cut. And he has a message for everyone, Michael. What is that message?
We live in a society.
Do we?
He said it. That's so good. No, yeah, we do. And I mean, it's beautiful, and it's so. I guess finally gamers have risen up.
I mean, look, I wasn't that excited about the Snyder Cut, but now we have Jared Leto in it saying, this is his quote, "We live in a society where honor is a distant memory. Isn't that right, Batman?" Oh my god. It's got to be meta. They got to know about the "we live in a society" meme, and they dropped that in just to, to create hype around it. And I'll tell you what, it has 100% worked.
Yeah.
I'm now looking forward to seeing what this is.
Yeah,
we live in a society.
Yeah. I mean, I am excited in a somewhat unironic sense, and I do think Jared Leto is obviously a talented actor, and I do feel like he kind of got screwed with the whole Joker thing or the whole Justice League thing, and I did feel sorry for him. So, but then having said that, it's kind of cold comfort to know that he's getting to star now in a Zack Snyder directed film featuring a literal meme as like the stinger. Yeah. So, we'll see how it works out for him, but
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we live in a society, man. Oh god.
Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out in the near and distant past. We give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host Michael, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Luke, and this week we are celebrating the 30-year anniversary of The Silence of the Lambs. So Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about The Silence of the Lambs?
Well, Michael, I have to say, I was disappointed right from the get-go watching this movie. Do you know why?
Because you didn't like how it started with because you always just naturally want to call it Silence of the Lambs because it's much easier to say.
Well, that has something to do with that, I guess, but my major problem is there are no lambs in this movie, are there?
Don't get me started on To Kill a Mockingbird. Gave me no advice on killing mockingbirds.
At least maybe in the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, like there's a shot of a mockingbird, in a tree. There are literally no lambs in this movie. Absolutely disgraceful. But anyway, let's get into reviewing this movie, The Silence of the Lambs. Is a 1991 American psychological horror. That's right, Michael. It's officially classed as a horror movie, interestingly, which we'll get into in a bit.
It's not Spooktober, though.
I know, right? The film was directed by Jonathan Demme and written by Ted Talley, adapted from Thomas Harris's 1988 novel. And the 1988 novel, I believe, is called, Manhunt. No. It's just called Silence of the Lambs, I believe. Yeah.
Maybe that was a sequel or something called Manhunt.
Yeah, I think he's written something called Manhunt or whatever. But anyway, it stars Jodie Foster as Clarice Starling, a young FBI trainee who is hunting a serial killer, and Buffalo Bill, Ted Levine. Sorry, he's played by Ted Levine. They're not the same person, obviously. Also, Anthony Hopkins, Scott Glenn, and it was released on February the 14th, 1991, which is, of course, Valentine's Day. And today, Michael, while we're recording this, is also Valentine's Day.
Yes.
Yeah, so what a lovely movie to talk about on this day, and what a lovely time to release this movie. Very, very fitting. It's kind of crazy. What's interesting is that this movie was released basically quite quickly because the studio, there was another movie in the works that was released at the back end of 1990, which the studio put all their money in, and this was kind of an afterthought. They didn't have enough money to market it, so they just quickly released it, and it was an absolute hit. I'll find that movie in a bit, which they pulled all their money into marketing. But yeah, so that's why it was released in kind of a weird time, February 14th. But yeah, exactly 30 years to the day since it was released. That's I don't know.
That's a rarity.
We tried to do it around the date of the anniversary, and so yeah, we've done a good job today. So Michael, can you tell me what the budget was for Silence of the Lambs? Yeah,
you kind of gave me a hint there by saying, one, that this was an afterthought, and two, that it did surprisingly well. So I'm probably still going to get it wrong, but afterthought, to me, I mean, even this seems like a lot, but it might be under. See, the thing is, I'm kind of wondering how famous, for example, Anthony Hopkins, because I know Anthony Hopkins is famous, but I also feel like this is his most famous role, so I'm kind of thinking to myself, I'm going to go for 20 million.
You know what, Michael? That is a very good guess. The actual answer is 19 million.
Yay!
So you're just a million off there. Congrats, really good. By the way, the movie that was scheduled to be released at the back end of 1990 was Dances with Wolves, which of course we've already reviewed. That's where a lot of the studio's attention was put into, and of course it did pay off. Dances with Wolves was a massive hit, but then they got an unexpected bonus with this movie, Silence of the Lambs. So yeah, you're right. Actually, I have given you a bit of a clue for the box office. Can you tell me what it was?
See, this is another example of there's a number it could have made that would be but wouldn't be considered a blockbuster. I usually underestimate, and I think this might not be an exception. I don't see this making huge amounts, so I'm going to go for 225 million.
Okay, yeah, I was worried you'd go too low, and you've still gone low. Okay. But you know what? This is it's better. I'm teaching you how to walk. It seems, at least.
Yes.
We're getting there. We've gone from crawling to you can stumble a bit.
Yes, like a little toddler.
Yeah, the box office was 272 million. Maybe in one of these days that you will guess over, and that'll be the biggest shock of my life.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was. See, the funny thing is, I was caught between, as you can probably guess by the fact I went for 225. I was thinking 200 or 250, and I was like, oh no, 250. That seems like too much. But I would have been closer if I would have gone for that.
Well, this movie was it caught fire. It was a sleeper hit, I believe, as it's known in the business. People just couldn't get enough of Anthony
They weren't
Hopkins.
silent about it.
No, they weren't. They couldn't get enough of Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. They loved him. They absolutely loved him. He was all that everyone was talking about. And yeah, this obviously we'll get into why this movie was a lot different to other movies of the time, and still right to this day, and why it was such a massive hit. But yeah, Hannibal Lecter, massive part of that, as was Clarice. But yeah, I think Hopkins took the headlines from what I could gather from what people were saying in 1991. But anyway, Michael. So yeah, Silence of the Lambs. Did you like this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. As is often the case with several of the thrillers we've done on this show, on this podcast, I think they tend to be quite effective. And this was an effective, entertaining, exciting film with a lot of intrigue. And, I think it worked. So yeah. I did like it.
I bet I can think of a really big reason why you like this movie. And I also like this quite a bit. Yeah, I really did like this movie. It's... I think it's not perfect, and I was thinking at one stage damn, this is really, really good. This might be one of the best movies I've ever rated. But I did have some issues with it, so I don't think it's going to get a perfect score. But yeah, it's still amazing. But first, Michael, I think it's necessary to go over how successful this movie actually was. As we said, it grossed 272 million from a budget of 19. A massive profit, but also it was critically acclaimed, as you can imagine. It became the third film, the other two being 1934's It Happened One Night and 1975's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, to win Academy Awards in all the big five categories, which are Best Picture, obviously, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It is also the only Best Picture winner widely considered to be a horror film, and only one of 6 horror films to have been nominated in the category. Is that interesting? Only one of 6, and yeah, the only one to have won. So the big five, Michael. The big five: director,
right,
picture, actor, actress, and of course adapted screenplay, as you would expect, considering one Best Picture. But yeah, so what do you reckon to that, Michael? Pretty damn good here.
Yeah, that is good. I mean, obviously we've established before that on many examples the Oscars are not the authority, but it's nice when they. It's nice when they are. I guess that's the thing with the Oscars. They're the thing everyone loves to hate. Whenever they get it wrong, people always dab on them. But at the same time, whenever a good film does well, people will point to the fact that it won Oscars. So yeah, this is an example of we just say, yeah, it won, and the Oscars confirmed it. But we don't do that with Green Book, do we?
This was just 2 years after Driving Miss Daisy as well.
Yeah, I know. That's funny.
That, yeah, but no. Actually, the thing is, what's interesting, it was released on 14th of February. I mean, it was also almost a whole year. Literally a whole year, because obviously the Oscars would have been in early 1992 since it came out. So which is a weird thing to think about, considering most Oscar contenders nowadays are released in November and December, and some are released earlier, but you release it at the back end of the year to get Oscar buzz. And The Silence of the Lambs literally a whole year, and it still picked up all those awards, which shows. I mean, of course, maybe it was different back in the day. Yeah, of course it was, in terms of when studios release movies. There wasn't, I think they did it there wasn't the same kind of.
Well, my understanding is actually that Harvey Weinstein and Shakespeare in Love was when it went crazy. Because like Harvey Weinstein's whole thing with Shakespeare in Love is, I saw a video about this. He basically pioneered the idea of specifically targeting films to get Oscars in order to capitalize on that.
He was good at targeting stuff as Weinstein.
Yes, he really was.
Yeah, he was. No, and so that's a bit of background on The Silence of the Lambs. We are dealing with quite a prestigious movie. I just remembered what we're doing next week. Just the contrast. But anyway, so Michael, have you got any nitpicks for Silence of the Lambs?
Yes, I have 3.
Okay, I have 1, 2, and I have 4 lit picks.
Okay, you've got 2. So I don't know what the rules are now. Shall I?
You go first.
All right. Okay. So first of all, this is like there's lots of things about the timing of this film which I find very strange. And the one line which shocked me is when she says they found Raspail's head an hour ago, and it does not feel as if just an hour has passed in between her finding the head and that thing happening. Like, it seems like, I must admit that I kind of wasn't completely clear on the time, but it seemed as if this film was supposed to happen over a much more short period of time than it seems like the film actually takes.
I'm sorry, this is a really shit nitpick.
No, I think it's good.
No, it's absolutely terrible. Move on to your next one immediately.
All right, okay. So I'm surprised they didn't have any kind of video security in Hannibal's room when he does all that stuff for as long as he's doing it, because it's kind of just like, you've got all this other security around him. I would think video security, I mean, they have that at bloody petrol stations. So, I understand that they would have had to kind of, I guess, rig it up because it's in a hotel room. Yeah, I know, but so obviously they have video security in his cell, and I just think they'd be like, well, we should probably at least keep an eye on him. That's like the minimum thing we should do.
Yeah, but he was in a temporary place though, wasn't he?
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of willing to concede it. I'm just like, I feel like they'd be like, well...
Again, I think this nitpick has holes. Move on to your next one.
Okay, and my final one is that I think it was stupid of Clarice to follow Buffalo Bill into the house. Not follow him into the house. Follow him when he was shooting at her, because it's his house. He has the home field advantage, and also he's got the fact that he can just be waiting for her around any corner. And the flip side is that she knows he can't leave. She knows he's like stuck in the house. So I would think she'd just be like, she should get the backup in and be like, okay, because the thing is, the worst case scenario is if she goes in there and, well, gets shot and killed, which is just so much more likely when she's having to stalk around the house. And of course, in the end, she does get screwed over by the whole lights turning out and everything. And she easily could have died were it not for Buffalo Bill having such a loud cock, by which I'm referring to the cocking of his gun.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, I think that I was thinking that. I was like, that's stupid. Maybe she was thinking, well, the senator's daughter's in there.
Yeah.
Maybe I could save her. That's what I was thinking. But I was like, yeah, as soon as he disappears, it's like... Because the thing is, if you die, like, that's it.
Yeah, because I wanted to clarify this. I was too embarrassed to say this because I was worried that this actually had been established and I couldn't be bothered to go back and check. She said that there were other cops coming, but that wasn't true, was it?
No, that wasn't true. She was trying to find Mrs. Littman, who of course was the guy's mother, and she was talking to one of the first victim's friend, at the restaurant or whatever it was, and she was so she would have known. So maybe they, if Clarice had gone missing, they would have been able to track her down. But yeah,
but then he would have also known that he would have had reason to think they were onto him, so he probably could have disappeared. So yeah, it was a very big risk. And also, just the other thing is, even if we say, well, she was trying to save the senator's daughter or whatever, she finds the senator's daughter and then she continues to go on. So yeah, I was just like, whatever. It was an example of, and to be fair, if this film is a horror film, if we're going to grant that, then we usually expect our horror films to have a couple of decisions that are made more for the sake of conflict than for the sake of rationality.
Clarice Sterling's going to be one of the best agents in the FBI.
Yeah, that's true. Although to be fair, I also found it's kind of weird because that scene, I was expecting this to be kind of reincorporated.
Starling, by the way, sorry, Starling.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to refer to her by her surname anyway. So that scene where she's doing the training and then she kind of doesn't check her... I can't remember what it's called. She doesn't check like the corner, and the guy kind of sticks the gun over there. I was kind of expecting that to be reincorporated when she was stalking around the house. This is just another thing, but like I was expecting her to walk around, and then he would be in the corner.
That was just because she's flustered, so she's not performing at her usual level.
I mean, it's fine.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be like a lesson which she learns. Otherwise, more emphasis would have been put on it, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, let's get
into... what are your nitpicks?
Yeah, my nitpicks.
And your lit picks.
So these are actually decent. Okay. Well,
we'll see.
Crawford.
I'm going to shit on them.
So... This one this one is definitely true. I don't get why this is in this movie. So Crawford, obviously Clarice's boss, they're storming this house of somebody who they believe is the killer, is Buffalo Bill in Chicago. They break into the house and they realize they're at the wrong house, like nobody's there. And then he suddenly says, "Clarice," like that. He gasps and says it, implying that he knows that Clarice is with the killer. you know. And I'm just like, well, how
Yeah.
does he know that? Like, she's in fucking Ohio. She hasn't told you anything about a promising lead, and he just goes, Clarice. That's just shit. Come on, you're better than that movie. You don't need to fucking do that.
Yeah.
My next nitpick is at the end when Clarice gets a call from Hannibal Lecter at the FBI graduation. My question is, how did he know that graduation was going on at that time? You know, like I imagine it's not something that's widely available. What time the FBI graduation ceremony is at? I would think what he would rather do is just like call her, you know, at her house. Basically, that would be an easy thing to do. You know, like I don't know, it seems easier. You know, and of course it's a nice setup because she's at the graduation, so it's like a nice ending. But yeah, I just thought, probably not what would happen. But anyway,
Yeah.
So my lit picks, Michael, my lit picks. My first lit pick is Armie Hammer. I'm watching this and I'm thinking, oh yeah, he's all this cannibal stuff. It's back. Like if they ever remix Silence of the Lambs, whoever produces the movie would be doing themselves a disservice if Armie Hammer isn't cast in that role.
Well, there are quite a few sequels to Silence of the Lambs, I know. So
Yeah, but
there's
I'm
like a
talking
whole
about
franchise
remake,
around it.
though.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. They could do a soft reboot with Armie Hammer because they don't do remakes anymore.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to do a soft reboot.
Of course, Armie Hammer would not be soft in that reboot.
Yeah,
He'd be rock hard.
yeah. I mean, that's great. So my next lit pick is the fact that not only is this, I don't know if it's a coincidence or they actually meant for this to happen. Not only, of course, are we doing it on the 30-year anniversary of Silence of the Lambs, this review, but also Jodie Foster's new movie, The Mauritanian, is coming out or has come out literally this weekend, and I like that. Because that's nice. Yeah, and it's the only movie she's in this year. So there you have it. And I would normally do like, let's guess what it's going to get on Rotten Tomatoes, but since it's already been released, I've seen it got like 67%. Yeah, it's about Guantanamo Bay. If anyone wants to watch that,
lovely.
yeah. And my third lit pick is Clarice, the new TV show Clarice. And you saw this, Michael, yeah, right. And here's the thing: I saw the promo for this throughout the last few weeks because it's on CBS. And I know it's on CBS because while watching the Super Bowl last week, the Super Bowl was on CBS, and I saw an advert for Clarice, which was on CBS, and I was interested. I was like, okay, so they're just basically what happens is it's a TV show that takes off from the ending of Silence of the Lambs. So Silence of the Lambs finishes, and then Clarice gets going, basically. But what is funny is for legal reasons they cannot mention Hannibal. They cannot mention Hannibal. They cannot mention Hannibal Lecter at all. So they can't mention anything about him. They can't like refer to him at all. So that's what's kind of funny about it. For legal reasons, they can't go into it. And yeah, I saw this take from someone on Twitter. This is Brandy Jensen. I just saw this today. The Clarice pilot makes no goddamn sense. LMAO, awful show. Someone replies, so powerful. Fucking bad. Very cool that Alex Kurtzman keeps getting projects somehow. Apparently they don't have the rights for Hannibal himself, so they can't say his name. Yeah, and just a series of comments basically deriding how stupid the show is. Let it get cancelled quickly so Netflix can buy the rights and we can get a new season of Hannibal. Yeah, that'd be a good take. So yeah, that's that.
What they don't tell you though is that also they weren't allowed to mention Hannibal for legal reasons in the 2001 sequel Hannibal.
Yeah, they weren't, were they? No.
Yeah, it was pretty confusing.
And or in Hannibal Rising.
Yes. Yeah. But they were in Red Dragon, so
that's the weird thing, you know. But anyway, so my last lit pick is this is a personal one for me. Back in school, I remember there was this guy. He wasn't Welsh, but his family was Welsh, and I always remember him getting like bullied for it because sheep. What?
Just imagine bullying someone for being Welsh.
Yeah, I mean,
that seems like a very Southern English thing to do, to bully somebody for being from Wales.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really it was mainly the fact that they shag sheep. Basically, that was the joke.
Yeah, got it.
And over and over, I remember this guy. I don't know if he'd seen the movie or not, but he just used to sit behind, because I sat next to him in one of the lessons, and this guy used to sit behind this kid and just go, "Hey," his name, and he goes, "Have you seen Silence of the Lambs?" And like he knew the movie, and I'm just like, I didn't know the movie. I didn't know what it was about. For all I know, it was about lambs. It was about sheep. But that was my first introduction to Silence of the Lambs, being used as an insult to shame this guy for being Welsh because Welsh people shag sheep. So there you go. That's how I first learned about Silence of the Lambs.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, that's pretty funny.
I mean, pretty funny. I mean, you had to be there, really. Maybe that's it. You had to.
Yeah.
Be there.
My first introduction was from the Ice Cube song "No Vaseline."
Why?
He mentions Silence of the Lambs in that. He says something like, it's something like, I don't even remember like the bar, like what it rhymes with. I might try and find it, but he says like, now I gotta play Silence of the Lambs, which I don't know where. I'll see if I can find it.
Okay, well, as mentioned before, there are actually no lambs in this movie. So, my friend could have, I wasn't really my friend, my colleague at school could have turned around and said, there's no actual lambs in that movie, you idiot. And that would have been a good omen. But anyway, let's get into the actual movie.
Oh, I've got it. It's pulling wools with your scams, presumably referring, of course, to pulling wool over someone's eyes. Now I gotta play the Silence of the Lambs. And the next line, just for the record, with a midget who's a punk too.
Yeah, I mean, but there's no sheep in it, so there's no wool involved. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
People need to watch the movie. That's my takeaway from this. But anyway, so the Silence of the Lambs, the actual plot. Clarice Sterling is a young FBI trainee who's hunting the serial killer Buffalo Bill, who skins his female victims. To catch him, she seeks the advice of imprisoned Dr. Hannibal Lecter, who is of course played by Anthony Hopkins, a brilliant psychiatrist and a cannibalistic serial killer. Scott Glenn and Anthony Held also feature. It was here we go. It was this film. The film was a second adaptation of a Harris novel after Manhunter in '86. That was it. That's what I was thinking. So another one of his books was adapted in 1986, which was Manhunter. So yeah, Silence of the Lambs, Michael. So what do we want to talk about first? The first thing in the plot. Yeah.
I tell you what I want to talk about, Luke. I want to talk about this, is it a horror film? Because we've been dancing around that. Some might say skeptically. And I guess I just want to say, did you find this film scary?
I mean, no. But I don't find a lot of horror films scary.
Yeah.
No, I didn't find this one scary. I mean, it's not a horror movie. I don't get it. People are just desperate to label stuff horror movies. It's not a fucking horror movie. It's a thriller. I don't know. I was so surprised when people say it's considered a horror movie. Hannibal Lecter, he's scary, and there's a serial killer in it, but it's not a fucking horror movie.
Yeah. Also, there's no. I would say it's like no more of a horror film than like Seven. Basically, like it's a very
Seven, yeah.
Seven, because I mean, at the end of the day, I was trying to think about like how one defines a horror film, and I'm not going to go into my whole thesis mostly because I didn't really come up with anything. But I feel like a horror film, I guess there needs to be, I guess there needs to be more. Well, it's pretty obvious, but there's nothing in this film that's like intended to startle the audience or anything like that. Like there is stuff that's obviously there to make you uncomfortable, like there's gross dead bodies and stuff. But it's presented, I guess, very passionlessly. Which is not a criticism. It just doesn't make it scary. Like when you see that dead body lying there on the cold hard slab or whatever, and looking at its skin that's been taken off and it's all gross and bloated and stuff, you're like, ugh, that's gross. But yeah, it's not horrific.
Yeah, there's horror movies don't necessarily have to scare you. Again, I think we talked about that with The Shining. Not really scary. Yeah, just gives you a feeling of dread and a feeling of unease. But this one, that just wasn't it for me. I was intrigued. But I wasn't like, oh, this is so creepy and scary. I don't know, maybe because I've seen so much media, and this movie kind of ignited a lot of like media around serial killers and so forth. But this was just, for me anyway, it was just like, oh, this is exciting, and I don't really care about all the scariness of it. Maybe at the time people in the 90s were so sheltered, they were like, oh god, Anthony Hopkins, oh he's going to give me nightmares. But nowadays we're built different in the year 2021. Nowadays he's just like there's no one can do it like him, but there's like 10 other media properties released every year that feature villains like Anthony Hopkins.
Saw.
The distinguished intelligent psychopath who kills people with class. So not a horror movie. I think we can agree on that. So let's get into now the plot, Michael, the actual plot. So the first scene where they meet each other. Clarice Sterling meets Hannibal Lecter. Like, let's think, it's literally like 10 minutes into the movie, and you get probably the most famous scene in the movie.
Yes.
The suspense and the tension is, obviously it's great. He's just standing there, you see him just standing there. You can talk for ages about every little detail on the scene. And maybe, considering that Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins both won Best Actor and Actress at the Oscars, could you say that this scene and this is going to be a take, Michael. I thought about this.
The best scene ever.
Well, not the best scene, because who knows what we define by the best scene. In terms of acting, though, the highest acting we've ever seen together.
That is, yeah. I mean, it's
by two people, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the thing is, I'd have to. It's kind of a case of it would be, it's hard to just do a direct comparison to everything I've ever seen before. But it is.
Do it.
Yeah. Okay. Every single thing in my head, I'll just do it right now. I'm processing it like a computer. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I will say this: once you get into there's good acting and there's bad acting, and obviously it's kind of hard to draw really clear delineations to be rank it exactly, because a lot of it's kind of, I guess, subjective in the impression it has on you. But I would say this is definitely very good acting from both people involved, and there's no weak link, and it's a very tense scene. I think that obviously helps with the
I think film
making you feel the acting.
I think film studies. I've probably studied that scene quite a bit. All the little elements, and I'm sure you can watch YouTube videos or whatever. But yeah, it's beautiful. I just have one quibble about how much Clarice cares about what the serial killer thinks of her. She seems to get quite agitated, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's because she spent her whole life in this field, or whole adult life, and this is the big prize. It's Anthony Hopkins, or it's it's not. It's a fucking Hannibal Lecter, Hannibal the cannibal, as she says. He's an incredibly famous guy. And she's finally meeting her. It's like, never meet your heroes. Obviously, he's not a hero of hers, but it's maybe that's why she's nervous. But I don't know. It seems to me that I really wouldn't care what someone like this would think of me. I don't know. It's just like she gets, like I said, quite agitated over it. It's like, why don't you turn that glaze on yourself, Doc? All those inquisitive skills on yourself, huh?
Yeah.
Can you do that? And I'm like, why? Don't get annoyed, man. He's trying to annoy you. Come on. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. That's apart from that, great scene. So somehow Hannibal Lecter, and of course she's there because of Buffalo Bill. Somehow Hannibal Lecter knows who Buffalo Bill is, since he's a former patient of his. And I just have to say, this is why this isn't a perfect movie. I just think, wow, how lucky for him. He knows about his first actual victim, since he found this victim decapitated. As he says, it was a fledgling killer's first kill. So he's known about Buffalo Bill and who he is for a while. And even though, so that's the first thing, that's very lucky for him. They just wanted to talk to him just because he might have some inside info, but he actually knows him personally and knows his name, which is that's crazy lucky. What can you say? And here's the thing. He could help the FBI, of course. He could, tell them, he says he wants to be let out of his cell, and he says, hey, I want to see, a tree or whatever. I just don't want to be with whoever the head of the Baltimore prison is, and of course Clarice gives him the offer, and he doesn't seem helpful until Clarice comes along. So my question is, well, I think it's not a question. It's this must be the case. He was just waiting until someone like her would show up, I guess. Crawford says if Clarice had been sent in with an actual agenda to talk to Hannibal Lecter, Lecter would have turned to stone, so he wouldn't have said anything. So is it the case he's just waiting for someone to show up that doesn't have an agenda? That doesn't have, doesn't want to ask him questions, and then I'll tell you about Buffalo Bill? I don't know, it just seems kind of like... just bullshit. I don't know. It's just and that's the thing. That's why it's not a perfect movie. It's so he clearly doesn't like the situation he's in. Why would he not talk with the FBI and get them to hash out an agreement to catch Buffalo Bill? That seems to me quite reasonable. But apparently we need to wait until Clarice Sterling walks into his prison. So what do you think? Yeah.
I think the character logic there, it doesn't really make much sense. I do think, see, in a way, I will say. And this is I guess quite a, they say high praise. This is quite a high criticism. But have you ever seen H. Bomber Guy's video on BBC Sherlock? If you haven't, doesn't matter. I can just kind of...
Yes, I have. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah. So basically, the point he makes is that Sherlock is really, he's not really written that intelligently. He's just kind of the show's logic kind of coalesces around him to make him seem more intelligent. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's kind of 3 examples I can think of in that vein, or maybe actually 4 examples, which would be one, you kind of mentioned how you're like, why does she care what he says about her? And I think the reason is supposed to be like, we're supposed to believe that Hannibal Lecter is just a master wordsmith who can just kind of get under people's skin with his words. And obviously the way they do that is just by having the characters react, really uncomfortable to what he says.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't necessarily come across convincing. Then obviously there's the fact that they're like, oh, he'll use his genius mind to help us find this person. And you're like, well, he didn't really use his genius. Like, Hannibal's genius mind, it's kind of, I guess it's worth noting, they literally could have gone to some standard, whatever criminal, just like your standard, I don't know if there's the right term, but like blue collar criminal, like somebody who happens to know the guy, and would have got the exact same result. The main takeaway and the main benefit was that they happen to know the guy. And then also there's the fact that they say these things like, obviously he'll turn to stone if someone's there without an agenda, which again, I guess is supposed to be like, oh, he's a really impossible person to decipher or something. And again,
he won't talk to the FBI. He won't help anybody. That's the point.
I guess it's supposed to make him come across as like, I don't know, mysterious, or like he holds all the cards and they need to be really clever in trying to get around him.
Clarice Sterling's unique sort of innocence that draws him out.
Yeah, and yet from a logical perspective, it doesn't really make much sense.
Yeah, why would that do it? Why would that hit? Why wouldn't he just like talk? If he's like, oh, if I can get a better situation, okay, let's do a deal, FBI. Let's do a deal. I mean, so it just seems quite weird, to be honest. And like you said, doesn't seem that logical, does it? His character, his motivation is a bit weird. And you could say, well, he's just screwed up in the head. So whatever. That's all the logic you need.
And I was just going to say the final thing is, you do have to wonder how he got that pen. Like, basically, I was kind of saying how the film makes him appear, and this is the more minor one, but like I just think to myself, oh, how did he get that pen? And I think, why didn't they show us? I'm like, I bet they didn't show us because they just couldn't think how it could possibly make sense for him completely strapped up with the pen on the desk to be able to get it. But no, that's not my thing. I will say, I think there is, and I stand by my reference to BBC Sherlock. There is an attempt to have kind of the logic of the film and the behavior and kind of dialogue of the actions, of the characters, coalesce to make Hannibal come across as this incredibly, smart guy who's a complete genius. When, as I said, one of the main things he impacts the film by is literally just pure luck. And some of the other instances where he's supposed to come across as, a master manipulator and all that kind of stuff, arguably comes across from the characters feeling unrealistic. Yeah. So acting's good though. Yeah,
his acting is very good. And that's my main takeaway. It just seems that Hannibal Lecter helps Clarice since he is amused by her. That's basically it. He likes her innocence. He likes her. So that's why he helps instead of, I don't know, just doing it just to get away from the warden who clearly he fucking hates. That's it's like you said, it's the Sherlock thing I think is a good comparison, but yeah, and even let's talk about the scene where he escapes. I mean, I think it's a fun scene. It's fun, he puts the guy's face on his head. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
genius, fucking genius. But again, I don't know. I just feel, I mean, you know what? Actually, cops are quite incompetent. That's the one thing we've learned. Cops, in the last year, like off the beat cops, they will just do. That's not off the beat. I don't know what the phrase is, like, not detectives. I don't know what regular cops. They can do stupid stuff, and this is in fucking Memphis. The Memphis police officers. I can probably imagine them doing something like that, just letting him get away and kill both of them. So there's that. Anything else to say in that scene?
No, I mean, I would just say so. I do like when, I guess, screenwriters in general, obviously I assume this is a scene from the novel, but screenwriters write themselves into a difficult situation, and then the characters get out of it in a way which is quite satisfying and quite entertaining. And I think overall it is satisfying and it is entertaining. And I like, I will say, how does he get that pen? It seems a bit convenient, and you do think, well, I wonder whether or not he would have been able to. But aside from that, like everything else pretty much as it plays out. And, I will say, I think it is convenient that they didn't have any security or anything like that. But kind of a mild convenience, because it is explainable. So that's kind of what I'd call it. Like, because it is a case of, well, it would probably make sense for them to have been like, we should have some security. But it's also very obvious why they, might have just been like, it's just a temporary thing. So it's explainable. And overall, everything else just works together really well. And again, you can point to minor conveniences. You'd be like, well, would they have taken, well, they probably, no, actually, no, there's not. I was about to say they maybe wouldn't have taken to a hospital right away, but they would have, because, he looked like he was in pain. So overall, everything works. And,
it's beautifully executed.
And it's like, the way they show it as well. Like, it's kind of just the way it builds up. Obviously, you've got the guy in the thing, and then they have the blood fall into the elevator. And, oh, he's waiting in the elevator, and then they shoot him, and you realize, oh wait, no, what's happening? Why isn't he reacting? And then obviously realize, oh, that's the body, and he's still waiting. And then like the way that whole thing is handled, from the moment of the guy getting on the obviously Hannibal Lecter getting on the ambulance, to them then thinking he's in the elevator, to then them realizing, oh wait, he's not. That whole thing is just a really well handled way of delivering, I guess, what you'd call a twist. I mean, obviously it's kind of weird because usually twists are at the end of a film, but it's kind of is a twist. It's like a miniature twist of like a 10-minute period.
It's weird because the thing is, he gets out, and you think, oh, Hannibal Lecter's out, but he doesn't do anything for the rest of the movie.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's escaped, and then he just that's it from him. We never, apart from obviously at the end of the movie.
You would have thought it would impact the plot slightly more. Yeah, that he does escape.
Yeah, and that's something maybe they could have written into to help at the end of the movie. So yeah, I guess let's talk about the end of the movie. So there's a break in the case when Clarice realizes that the guy, who Buffalo Bill, must have known the first victim, because he says we cover what we see. So Buffalo Bill must have known about the first victim, but wouldn't that thought have crossed people's minds anyway? I don't know. Like, it seems that if it was known that she was the first victim, then surely you would look around Belvedere, Ohio first, right? Like, you'd ask all the neighbors, like, specifically, like, of course the policeman must have done it, but like, you'd really hammer home, like, because I've watched some serial killer stuff, and it's pretty obvious, like, the killers, what they often do, serial killers, they often kill closest to home first.
Yes, it's
easier. And that's just
I'm not an
sense
expert. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, see, I'm not an expert on serial killers. I don't watch all this stuff about serial killers, and yet even I would think, they probably start off like the first thing they do before it becomes, just something they do for funsies. Yeah, they probably start off with like doing extra, like they see someone like, oh, I'm gonna kill that person. So yeah,
what would have been better is, I don't know if this would have been possible if they realised that the third, because she was found third, this victim, she was actually the first victim, and that triggered things. But I don't know how you'd do it, because I don't know how, if you didn't realise that she was the first victim already, how would you do that? How would you figure that out later?
I think the best thing to have done would have been like, if she would have been, maybe there would have been like a guy kind of, a lab scientist kind of doing the autopsy, because as I already said, and you didn't like me pointing or me mentioning this, but this film does seem to take place over a rather strangely short amount of time. And with that said, you could have easily introduced a lab scientist kind of being like, oh yeah, I'm going to look into this.
But that's
quite
the
early
thing.
on in the beginning.
The first autopsy would have surely, because they autopsy the body. Of course they do initially. Surely the first one would have triggered that.
Wait, I mean, well, I'm saying that they only find the third body kind of as the film is just getting started, and in that way, it's like they're only doing the third autopsy towards, I guess, the end of the film. And then it's like
okay, but that would automatically mean that they go to Belvedere, Ohio then.
No, yeah, but what I'm saying is like, so let's say for example the other people, so towards the end, the autopsy guy, maybe he's like, oh, we can't do the autopsy. I don't know. So I don't know how long it takes to do an autopsy. But I'm just saying, like, they only find out that she was the first victim. Like, maybe there's like a big moment where he like calls her up.
I agree, but I'm saying I don't know how that would be possible to do. It wouldn't be possible, because if you're doing an autopsy, like, why would a second autopsy confirm that, oh, actually she's been dead for like 3 months instead of just a week?
You can have the standard, like, somebody misses something, like that is a thing that does happen. It'll be like,
I know, but like, come on, that's the
I mean,
whole
it'll be
job.
It'll be no, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that would be, imagine how unsatisfying that would be as a twist. Just like, the other guy had no idea what he was doing.
The other day, it was his first day on the job. He didn't really know what he was nervous, and this fucking killing comes out, and he's just like, he's so flustered. But a real professional down in DC and the FBI goes to see it, and they're like, this was his first victim. I mean,
Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of in The Simpsons, where Marge has to go identify a body at the morgue, and she's like, that's not my uncle, and this man's not dead. And then Mole Man comes out like, that's what I've been trying to tell you.
Yeah, maybe we have that situation.
She's not dead.
Okay. Clarice goes to Ohio. She finds some pictures behind a box, since, she's a girl, and all the other cops were males, of course. They wouldn't have known to look for that.
Men.
This special box that girls have, that they hide their pictures.
Oh wait, hold on. That this special box that girls have sounds like a euphemism.
Yeah, I mean, you can read it like that, but what else could I describe it as?
I don't know. I mean, I just think it's okay. Sometimes there are inevitable euphemisms, and in that case, you just have to embrace them.
Right. Okay. Sure. So she figures out the killer is starving the girls for 3 days to make a dress out of the girl's skin. A women's suit out of real women, as she says. So she thinks she's cracked it, but of course Crawford thinks that he's already found the right man, a guy called James Gunn, Of course, that isn't the case. And yeah, then she goes over to his to the actual killer's house, to Buffalo Bill's house, and of course you have that shootout, which we said, yeah, it was a bit stupid of her to do in the nitpicks. But here's my thing: I don't think the ending is as dramatic as I would have liked. She finds him and then realizes he is Buffalo Bill quite easily, and then it is all over after she shoots him. Like, it's not that climactic an ending. Like I said, I would have liked to see Hannibal Lecter involved. Like, he meets Clarice, out in the wild, out in the open, and he helps her along the way a bit more or something. That would have been good. It just seems like she's in Belvedere, Ohio, and then 5 minutes later, she's found Buffalo Bill. Like, it doesn't seem to be that great a climactic ending. Yeah, and maybe she visits the house and then walks away and then comes back. I don't know. Like, so just give me more than what happened. Basically, I was a bit disappointed by the ending of the movie. What do you think?
I think they should have had Hannibal Lecter show up at the end and save the day and do like a classic action line. Like Buffalo Bill could have been like, diplomatic immunity, and then Hannibal Lecter shows up like, it's just been revoked. That kind of thing, like a classic line. I think that would have really added to the stakes of it. No, overall, it's
just been revoked, Bill.
Yes. No,
he's like, I've helped you, Clarice. Now I get my reward. He just takes Buffalo Bill into the next room and starts eating him.
Eats him. Yeah.
So, I guess you did, Doc. I guess go on now.
I love the taste of buffalo. You could say.
Fucking perfect. There we go. Boom.
He could have torn his arm off and been like, I'm enjoying a buffalo wing. No, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of, I do kind of agree. I mean, it is a bit like. I feel like it's funny because I said the twist with like Hannibal escaping was like really exciting. I think the rest of it, there's not really much of there's not like the big twist moment that usually happens in like a lot of kind of thrillers. I mean, obviously Seven is a good example. Like a lot of thrillers, you get the twist moment. Even in Hot Fuzz, when you get the classic, there's just the one killer actually, and then he realizes it's multiple people. That kind of moment of like somebody hears something and it just triggers something. That doesn't really happen. I think that does make it a bit less climactic. And then there's, also the fact that I will say I think the action is a bit cheapened by the fact that I think Buffalo Bill could have killed her quite easily.
That's actually a reason though. That's the reason why he didn't.
Oh, I know why. It's because he didn't want to kill a woman because he wanted to wear her skin. I don't know. That sounds like it could be. Okay, I'm excited to hear the reason. But I guess that comes in under him, yeah.
We'll get into it now because now we're going to talk about, I guess, the themes, of course. And first, I want to read about Clarice, or an article about Clarice, to be more specific. This is from David Crow. I think it was like in Den Geek or something. The Silence of the Lambs and Clarice's lifelong battle against the male gaze. And this is the central point of Silence of the Lambs. Of course, Clarice, she's a heroine. She has to battle against people's perceptions of her. And this article, I think, by David Crow goes into it in a lot of detail. Okay, I'm going to start here. In Silence of the Lambs, the all-consuming Dr. Lecter, it's hardly the only monster in Clarice's life, even if he is the creature at the centre of Dr. Chilton's labyrinth. Rather, the real monster, with the capital M consuming Clarice, is just about every man she meets. Among them, Dr. Lecter is but an urbane drop in the ocean. This is foreshadowed during the film's opening moments, when after coming down from the obstacle course, Clarice loads onto an elevator with a half dozen other FBI trainees, each towering over her by at least a foot. In a snapshot, we can understand the widespread buttoned-up skepticism of the patriarchal institution she's attempting to join and improve. After all, in the next scene, her new boss, Jack Crawford, played by Scott Glenn, admits she caught his attention when she grilled him in a classroom over the FBI's sordid history in the civil rights era. Crawford welcomes Clarice's earnestness and repudiation of the good old boys club in law enforcement. Still, he only picks her for this assignment because he sees her as a proverbial honeypot meant to entice Dr. Lecter, a pretty face meant to appeal to the lonely and incarcerated cannibal. Hannibal takes it a step farther too when he asks if Clarice has considered that the kindly Jack Crawford is attracted to her. Dr. Lecter relishes planting the idea of Clarice's boss fantasizing about her. How else would Crawford think to pick her to interview the monster? That's not well written, I will say. But we got there in the end. But these taunts, which are intended to embarrass, are rooted in Lecter's two most powerful weapons, acute observational skills and the ability to speak uncomfortable truths. He uses them again during their final encounter before his escape when Hannibal asks Clarice, "Don't you feel eyes moving over your body? Don't you feel the male gaze objectifying and defiling?" So yeah, that's part of his article, and I think this is completely accurate. I mean, she you could say from the first shot, when she walks into the elevator, the way she's dismissed quite a bit, that she doesn't get the respect that she deserves. She's fighting an uphill battle, and even Jack Crawford, he sends her, not because he thinks that he can gain any valuable information from Lecter by using Clarice, apart from the fact that Clarice is a woman, and that's why she's there. So anything else to say on that, Michael?
Well, I will say I had noticed that kind of theme, I guess, or that tendency in the film of like at first I kind of pointed it out as just like an oddity, like because I'm an idiot who doesn't notice themes or anything like that. I was like, wow, every single guy just seems to be hitting on her all the time, and then I was like, as I was watching the film kind of again and thinking about it, as I sometimes inclined to do when it comes to films, I was like, oh, it's probably like this film is trying to communicate something about men.
Yeah, let's continue. One of the most remarkable things about Silence of the Lambs 30 years later is its intelligence, much like Clarice's frank way of addressing the overt sexism and misogyny in society. This is not done the sometimes hand-handed way of modern media, with didactic speeches and the easily defeated abusers who get their deserved comeuppance. Instead, this problem is shown to be the uncomfortable truth of our reality, and a truth that sadly changed little. Even before Dr. Lecter verbalizes the oppressiveness of the male gaze, Clarice and the audience know it's there in the elevator, and perhaps also with Crawford's more smiling friendliness. It's something not even unwelcome, as when Clarice flirts with the gawky bug specialist at the Smithsonian, and he even gets to attend her Quantico graduation later. But it's constant, and mostly insulting, if not outright predatory. Whether in the gaze of all those criminally insane patients whom Hannibal shares a cell block with, or in a dozen hard stares from a West Virginian's sheriff's department, it's always menacing Clarice. That's the case. Throughout the movie, wherever she goes, it's there. And even her boss Jack Crawford engages in it. Just she gets hit on, like you say, by the guy at the Smithsonian who's a bug guy who she laughs it off. It happens. It happens constantly. And again, it's just it's I guess meant to convey more than anything just the battle she has to have to earn respect, like we said before. When she entered the funeral home with her boss, once again all these law enforcement types had a foot above her in height, and their eyes closed at that distance to cover her body. No one says an outwardly sexist or sleazy remark. They don't have to. In fact, the only cruel word comes from her own boss when Crawford bends to the local prejudices by marking Starling as soft and lesser by virtue of her gender while chatting up the sheriff. Later, Crawford offers a half-hearted apology, saying he only did that to integrate himself with the regressive rube he needed information from. But Clarice is never one to let the right thing go unsaid. Cops look at you to learn how to act. Clarice respectively but assertively pushes back. It matters. Crawford smiles and shrugs, point taken, before dozing off. But obviously the point is not taken, and the patronising tone of even a decent man like himself belies his kindness. It demonstrates why the insidiousness of patriarchal double standard persists. So anything else to say on that, Michael?
No, I have nothing to say, but for that I concur.
So that is, the background noise of it all. Like Clarice is constantly battling these stereotypes that people set out about her. But as the article continues, by the movie's end, the subtext becomes text inside Buffalo Bill's dungeon. For here is a basement that a man retrofitted into a torture chamber for women, members of the gender he covets and despises. As with the obstacle course, Clarice enters this space brazenly and defiantly, finding its labyrinth centre where Bill has turned off the lights. Hidden behind his night vision goggles, the killer thinks he's master, and Clarice is his next victim. One more sacrifice to feed upon. Finally, the male gaze we spent the whole movie dreading from Clarice's vantage is flipped, and we watch her through Bill's green-tinted voyeurism. This is the metaphor taken to its most extreme, with the camera sharing headspace with the serial killer, yet it's not too far removed from the monster that stalked Clarice all her life. When Clarice once again turns the tables on this assumed authority and shoots Bill dead, she slayed one version of the Minotaur and earned her perch in a system that has resisted her. We see her triumph via the graduation at Quantico. Now she is a celebrity among the FBI. We also see it in Crawford's genuine affection and admiration for the young women. And that's basically why, at the end of the movie, Michael, you were asking why Buffalo Bill doesn't kill her immediately. It's basically, a metaphor. And that the whole movie is about how, she has to basically fight off this, as Crow puts it, a male gaze. And yeah, she literally does that right at the end of the movie, literally. So that, yeah, that's why it's there. Are you happy with that explanation?
Yes, I like it. I like when logic doesn't have to be everything. You can make an argument like, I don't know. I mean, well, actually, so it's not really a matter of logic, but I guess what I'm saying is it's a case of also it feeds into the themes, and I am somebody who is willing to certainly say like, hey, if it feeds into the themes, that's better. And so yeah, I'm not gonna sit there and cinema sins it.
Yeah, exactly. I can imagine CinemaSins would definitely sin that. They sin that to hell. But yeah.
Whoa, bro, that's not ding.
Yeah.
It'll be like a not shooting the person in the dark cliche.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I was thinking at the time, what's this? And I was like, well, he's toying with her in some way. And yeah, this, of course, Crow does it well. He spells it out. Yeah, basically, this guy, yeah, he thinks, Clarice isn't a threat, thinks he can, just watch her and everything's going to be fine. And then, yeah, he gets shot. And that's the thing about Clarice. I was thinking about this and I was like, yeah, she is like a hero, or a true heroine, as it were. Like the point of the movie, I guess, it's called Silence of the Lambs. And, she has that story about protecting the lambs. She doesn't matter what anybody throws at her. She is trying to save innocent people. And, she, as they say, Michael, nevertheless, she persisted. Isn't that right? Nevertheless, that's the thing. I know this kind of language nowadays has become like kind of I don't know. I guess frustrating, but back in the day, I can imagine. She's this person. Clarice would have been heralded as true. I mean, she still is, of course, she still is. But you see more characters like her nowadays. That she's not unique, but she was, I guess, one of the first. And I was thinking, is it a case, because of course we're talking about Silence of the Lambs, that's the title of the movie, is it a case that she is a lamb and she transforms into someone who defends them, or she was never a lamb and she's just trying to protect them? I don't know, but yeah, I think that's basically why the movie's called that. So yeah, you got anything to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, regarding why it's called Silence of the Lambs, I think I think it must make sense for it to be more personal than just like, obviously it has to be a bit more direct than just that there's some connection between, an indirect connection between these women who are being killed in the lambs. I think it would make sense that she obviously feels personally implicated and that obviously therefore attaching her experience with sexism, I guess, to the experience of obviously these people being murdered, these women being murdered, and her dealing with that, and that being in a sense that there is an equivalence between her defeating the serial killer and her overcoming sexism. Yes, I like the idea that the silencing of the lamb or the silence of the lambs is therefore that she's able to herself kind of overcome the I guess institutional sexism, I guess you call it nowadays, a microaggression that is an expression or a reflection of the actual crime she's solving. So yeah, I think that's probably the best interpretation of the title in terms of being directly relevant to what's happening in the film. Second only to it being about literal lambs, which would have been much better.
That would have been much better, yeah. I was thinking maybe it's like, remember Sicario? Remember
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Kind of the opposite of that. The Sicario theme was the world is too dangerous, for the innocent. And of course, Emily Blunt plays the innocent character who's just like overwhelmed. And of course, she is a woman. And I think we disagreed at the time about if the movie had anything to do with gender. It's just like, hey, she's a cop. And maybe it had something to do with that. I'm not sure, but yeah, it just seems to be the opposite of that. It's like, yeah. Even though this world isn't for her, it doesn't matter. She's just gonna keep on going.
And I will say, I think so. I guess it's worth noting. Obviously, funny enough, this film was of course made in the 90s, and obviously 90s was when the idea of like girl power feminism was coming about. But I do think that this film, obviously, it's not a film where
girl power,
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, that's the thing. This film, it's more, and also I think this film has a certain cynical edge to it, which of course you can see in the fact that Hannibal himself goes out. The film does not have a happy ending, which I guess would reflect the fact that if its themes are about sexism, obviously it doesn't. It's not like she, has some kind of big, like I say, girl power moment at the end. It's not Legally Blonde. There we go. That's my shocking take.
No, there isn't really a happy ending, like you said. She gets the promotion, but yeah, she's still in this world and she's gonna have to keep at it. And yeah, I was thinking, well, I don't know about you, Michael. I don't have the greatest love for the FBI.
No, yeah,
or law enforcement in the United States in general. As I kind of alluded to earlier by trashing the cops from Nashville. But yeah, I don't know. It seems, of course, there was a reference to the civil rights era and what the FBI did under J. Edgar Hoover, targeting MLK and all of that stuff. Hoover was head of the FBI, right? Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, so the FBI is now, we're in the start of the early 90s, and the FBI is displayed, as a good organization, I guess. Like, it's not displayed as, somewhere where, the problems, I guess, of, the what happened with Hoover, that's in the past. That's all in the past. We're different now. But I think, obviously, nowadays, when you have a great appreciation and understanding of, well, certainly from our perspective, people in the UK, understanding like what the FBI does and what the FBI has done in these last few years. There's this story the other week that the fucking one of the Proud Boys, the white nationalist group in America,
Yeah.
the head of the Proud Boys was an informant to the FBI, and you just look at that and you're like, Jesus, fuck the FBI for. Why would you have a Proud Boy as an informant? And it's just like, yeah, it's of course this movie was made at a time where nobody was thinking about the FBI in sort of negative terms, but now looking at it, I just think with what we've seen over the last few years, yeah, I think this movie, the message is a lot stronger back in the 90s because she's being a good guy. Because she's a cop and she's fighting for the innocent, and that's why she joined the FBI. And it just, that's not the reality at all, is it? And maybe, of course, people could still buy it nowadays. They'd still buy it in like 2021, but it feels like, anyway, you could buy it a lot more in like the early 90s. That sort of storyline, like people believed that more. It feels like.
Yeah. I think in general, obviously with films like this, I think it's kind of, everyone talks about the whole or the phrase "all cops are bastards" and how literal that's supposed to be taken. I think about, it's funny, I've already mentioned Hot Fuzz once. I've always thought about the way that, and I know that the British police are not, they don't murder people like the US police do, not in the same way. But there's obviously a line in the whole thing in Hot Fuzz is like, I wanted to be a police officer, and he wanted to be a police officer because like of his, I can't remember the exact thing, but it was basically for a very good reason. It was essentially, the film did, obviously it's a comedy, but it did seem to sincerely present being a police officer as like a noble pursuit. And I will say, I guess I'm generally willing to kind of, in the context of the film, compartmentalize the law enforcement in a way that obviously I wouldn't do the exact same thing in reality, but like when we're talking about a film about a serial killer, I'm able to kind of, even if it's I don't know why the CIA would be involved in this, but the point is, even if it's like a very dodgy organization, if the film is about a serial killer, I'm just like, okay, well obviously the law enforcement are going to be the ones dealing with it, so I'm willing to just obviously it's not a case of ignoring, but I would say so. I think it's, yeah.
So I was just gonna say, I think it's like portraying her as like a heroine, like
yeah,
she's
yeah,
a hero. And I think about how, of course, she'd be about 60 years old. I mean, that's what the age Jodie Foster is right
60-year-old white ex-FBI.
Yeah, but not ex-FBI. Just like if she could still work for the FBI now, and I imagine she would have risen through the ranks of the organization.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
She's clearly very good at her job. I'm like, hey, maybe if Clarice Sterling existed, she'd be talking to the Proud Boys right now.
Oh, yeah, that is actually,
and that's what I think. It's like back in the day. I mean, at least I'm saying most people. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But I feel like nowadays people, maybe of our generation, are much more conscious of law enforcement, particularly in the United States, not being the quote unquote good guys. And that definitely wasn't the case in the 90s. It was very clear, like the FBI, the CIA. They were the good guys, and definitely more so for the FBI. And exactly.
Also, I feel like the 90s was peak when people just imagined the FBI mostly solving alien problems. That's in my head. Like I imagine in the 90s,
that was Men in Black, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were like, the FBI. They deal with serial killers and aliens.
Yeah, the FBI, they're there to protect you. And I think as unfortunately what we've seen over the last few years. I've learned over the last few years really that is not the case. It puts a bit of a dampener on it. Again, that wouldn't have been a dampener in the 90s because nobody would really think that, apart from, if you're like very fringe. Nowadays, it's not that fringe to question whether somebody working for the FBI can ever be good. But anyway, so let's talk about, I guess, the role that Clarice Sterling played, or the role that Jodie Foster played in particular, because of course she's the actress. This is part from an article from Roxana Hadidi. So she writes there were a load of good gigs in Hollywood in the 1990s, but playing a woman in a high-profile thriller was not one of them. You were probably acting opposite Michael Douglas, playing some sort of scorn lover or murderous bisexual or sexually harassing boss. There was some juiciness to those roles, and Sharon Stone certainly made an impression, but not much depth. Maybe you were alongside Morgan Freeman or Denzel Washington, but you were probably a murder victim or someone who barely escaped being murdered, and your story arc fundamentally served theirs. There was a way this genre worked, and women were not the primary heroes of it. Clarice Starling is the kind of believably nuanced, thrillingly capable, deeply human female protagonist who didn't star in their own movies very often 30 years ago, and still doesn't now. I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot more like female protagonist, movies back now than back then. But yeah, I think that's the case. Like she, it's kind of revolutionary, that role. This of course Jodie Foster is quite short. She's not very physically imposing, and she's the hero of this thrilling action movie. That wasn't the case back then, and it's still not that common now, but it's more common. But yeah, I just wanted to point out the fact that Clarice's role is quite extraordinary. Like that this movie, existed back then. See, I guess the phrase ahead of its time, maybe that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but yeah, it certainly seemed very different to all the other thrillers that were going on back in the in the day. What do you think?
I think there's a bit of a sexual dimension to a lot of thrillers, and obviously there is to an extent I guess you'd say sexual dimension to this film, but definitely usually it is a standard instance of either, well, the women, I guess the term is femme fatale. They're all Bond girls. You're all their victims. So obviously Sharon Stone's like the kind of sexy bad guy or whatever, and obviously in this film, yeah, she's just like a normal person. And there's, in a weird way, even though the film deals with gender politics, she doesn't really come across as, she just feels like a normal human being, like a just very real human being. And
that's what makes it great. She's just a normal human. She's just a standard hero.
Yeah, because I think what you're reading said something about her being subtle or believable.
Yeah, believable, totally. So yeah, that's Clarice, and the role of Clarice. Quite an extraordinary role. To think about, really. Now, let's talk about another extraordinary role. Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. Now, of course, he became an iconic character. The Mask, as well, became iconic. And according to The Guardian, before Silence of the Lambs, films portraying psychopathic killers tended to be cheap and nasty gore fests, such as Friday the 13th, Halloween, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Serial killers had been claw-handed bogeyman with melty faces and rubber masks. By contrast, Lecter was a highly intelligent man with impeccable manners and played by an actor with impeccable credentials. So yeah, that was what was different about him. Like I said, also kind of a revolutionary role. And obviously the dynamic between him and Clarice, very famous. And Michael, I don't know what else to say. Of course, like I said before, there have been many characters that have come along since then that have been, very, they're very similar. Not, of course, directly similar, but have similar traits as Hannibal Lecter. The smart, classy psychopath. I guess if you got anything.
Just one more thing I'd like to say regarding the cinematography, because I was thinking about this. They use I think a lot of close-ups, and so close-ups of Hannibal Lecter and also POV shots of people. Well, I think particularly Clarice POV shots looking at Hannibal Lecter, which obviously kind of puts you in the headspace, and obviously the close-up shots really are unnerving, as close-up shots often are, and I would just say they kind of add to the general oomph of Anthony Hopkins' performance.
Yeah, no, the cinematography is great when you get a close-up, of course. Yeah, everything works in conjunction to create a great aura around this character. And so, I'd just like to hear you give an impression of him saying, Fava Beans, I had his liver with fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Okay. Yeah, see, this doesn't really require an accent, because his accent's a bit like mine anyway. Like, I ate his liver with a... See, wait, what was it? Some fava beans and a nice Chianti?
Yes.
Is that pronounced? Yeah. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Yes, I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. There we go.
There you go.
Done. Nailed it.
Well done. Isn't it true that was ad-lib, that noise?
I hope it was.
I think I remember hearing that.
I hope it was. That would be great. Yes. I am having an old friend over for dinner.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
It's funny.
You gotta love it. Yeah. Apparently, though, he's not a psychopath. He has empathy for Clarice. Like, he cares about her.
Oh yeah.
To some degree, at least. And I think that means he can't be a psychopath. He's just psychotic. There's a difference. Yes.
He kills because he cares.
I just find them so tasty, Clarice. He can't help it. It's like, imagine if you could never have your favorite meal.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be really hard? Like, Come on.
Yeah,
You gotta
that
come
reminds
up
me of the Louis C.K. joke about molesting kids, where he's like, it's illegal and they still do it, which must mean it's pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just it's illegal, it's like one of the worst
No,
crimes you
yeah,
can do.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It's not like fucking parking on a yellow line.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
But no, yeah, that's the thing. Like, that's what you think about cannibals, though. It's the same logic, you know. Like, it's it's illegal, and also some might say a pretty morally bad thing, and yet they just got to eat those people because it's just
Yeah. I
you
mean,
develop a taste for it.
yeah, you can't help it. So let's now talk about Buffalo Bill to end. Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked a lot about Hannibal Lecter there, but obviously, I don't think there's much more to say. Obviously, Anthony Hopkins got his Oscar and was forever a legend after that, and that's that. So Buffalo Bill, he of course is the killer in this movie.
Yeah, it's funny that he is the killer, and yet he's not like the main. Like, it's always really funny to me that Anthony Hopkins isn't the main bad guy in this film.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the
quite
thing.
rare.
Yeah, it's like that's all you remember. You don't really remember Buffalo Bill from it. At least when I rewatched it, I was like, oh yeah. I mean, of course, I knew about the story, but it's like, oh yeah, it's not really about Hopkins, is it? But anyway, so Buffalo Bill hates himself and thinks that makes him a transsexual, but he actually hates who he is because I think someone Hannibal Lecter says he has been systematically abused for years in his childhood.
Yeah.
So this is why. I guess he's like how he is, and I know, Michael, you did in one of your main channel videos make the argument that he since he wants to become a woman, he's a danger to women. I remember seeing that video, but I think it is the case that he actually he actually is just he actually hates himself, and that's why he's a killer. Anything to say on that?
No, yeah. I mean, so I had 3 things to say, which I think I get quite quickly. I will say, first of all, there is one line which I've heard someone else point out it's unfortunate, and I think it is when he says, I think the line is, he's not a transsexual. His pathology is 1,000 times more savage, and it is funny how that line implies that like there is a base transsexual thing. I will say.
Did you hear my joke, by the way?
Oh yeah, I did. Sorry, I was gonna
acknowledge it. I was like,
yeah, I know. Yeah, so, I mean, that's the thing. I will say regarding it. There's like three things I find interesting. The first thing is that one, obviously, it's funny because the J.K. Rowling novel came out, and I think it gets to the fact that there's like different terminology, and that technically speaking, it's weird because obviously the terminology even regarding like terms like transsexual and transgender has kind of changed even since the 1990s.
I thought that. I was like, do they mean transgender or do they mean transsexual?
Yeah,
like they get pleasure out of being a different gender while they're having sex, basically. That's what transsexual specifically means, I believe. That would make sense, right? Yeah,
because I think, my understanding is that the new rules of the terminology is that transsexual now means somebody who has had a sex change. Transgender obviously means somebody who identifies as a different gender, and transvestite means somebody who dresses up.
So I'm thinking of transvestite.
Yes, yeah, but obviously the thing is, I think the terminology has changed, obviously, because it's an idea, an idea that has been developing, and therefore, like, that's kind of the thing though, and it's kind of an issue of association, because obviously the big thing with the J.K. Rowling thing is lots of people pointed out, well, the character as it is written, and I don't know much about the book, but the character is not actually transgender; they're just a cross-dresser, and I will say it's obviously a different thing, and therefore I think
there's no such thing as a dog whistle either.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the thing though. Yeah, obviously it's easy enough to. But here's the other thing I think about it. I do think there is a question of, are tropes which present, let's say, I'm going to use, I don't know what terminology for this, I'm going to say non-conventional expressions of gender and sexuality as suggesting some kind of being a killer, like being a psychopath or something.
Yeah.
And yeah. I will say that the issue with it is, I do think it's probably true that insofar as like, there's, let's say, the standard person is just like the, just whatever. And then there's people who have different things on top of that. Like there's people who have different kind of, like I say, non-standard, unconventional expressions of gender and sexuality. And I think it's likely that somebody who is a bit off, a bit quirky, let's say, is likely to also present in a different way when it comes to things like gender and sexuality, and also be a murderer. So it's kind of like, it's a weird situation where...
you can't just fling that in
no,
and be a murderer. Like, that's a big...
no, I mean, well, here's the thing. See, I guess what it is, it's the old issue of... there is statistics to show, for example, that lots of people... disproportionately more people who have sex with people of the same sex will also have sex with people who are below, well, even prepubescent. Now, the issue is, and this is what I want to get to, there's like loads of different complications there. Like there's the fact of, well, maybe the reason that people do that is because they already know they're doing something socially unacceptable, so they do it because of that, and that's why, or maybe the reason they do it is because people have been abused for their sexuality, and that causes them to develop dodgy ideas. The thing is, obviously, that's nobody.
The case in Hollywood, at least.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, so I think it's, and obviously, you have Kevin Spacey, for example, who was like, he came at, basically the thing is he'd been like abusing. Was he having sex with underage? Like, okay, was he having sex with prepubescent people or underage people?
I think it was like teenagers. I don't think.
Okay,
it was prepubescent.
Yeah. But anyway, basically,
I think he was also raping them.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I mean, not sex. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, it was statutory rape by definition. But yeah, so basically, raping teenagers, and obviously, then he's like, "Hey, I'm gay," and obviously, people were like, kind of like, well, those two things don't have anything to do with each other. But I do think there's an aspect of, if you are somebody who just has the most boring vanilla sexuality, you're probably not going to have any other kind of weird quirks to go along with that. Whereas if you're somebody who already is unconventional in the way you behave, well, maybe it's more likely you'll have some other quirk. And therefore, I think ultimately, I agree that this idea of, because obviously it's important to understand that, I mean, let's just take J.K. Rowling as an example. I am willing to believe that people like J.K. Rowling don't have really a problem with people being gender non-conforming and unconventional in their gender expression. They just have, other issues going on. And therefore, obviously from that perspective, like nobody who just is, if you're a man who wears makeup, obviously nobody thinks that should be considered a murderer. But I think it's also reasonable to, I think as long as we have films about kind of weird psychopaths, they're probably going to continue to be presented as kind of eccentric. And I think it's just unavoidable that eccentric will extend to being unconventional in the way you express gender and sexuality. So ultimately, I think you can't really, I would say it's kind of a trope you just have to, that just is always going to exist. And that's kind of my opinion on it.
That's the thing of a lot of serial killers, what they are motivated by, they have a sexual motivation underneath it. And I remember watching Mindhunter, and I think I've referenced this quite a lot, but yeah, it keeps coming up.
You always mention it. It's great. We do. This is you only pick serial killer films, so you can.
Yeah. One of the people, I can't remember the serial killer, but basically he had like a foot fetish, I believe, or something, and he murdered his victims.
Oh, that's the freakiest one.
And
Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, and he dressed up in women's shoes. He'd like to collect women's shoes and like to put women's shoes on. And it's like something that, is quite weird. And I think it was based off a real character. I assume it was anyway, because all of the others were. So, that actually exists. So, yeah.
So, I think that kind of gets to it.
Yeah,
basically.
So again, that is the inevitability of that, I guess.
And you are the serial killer expert. The only other thing I will say as a final point is I also think it's worth noting that, obviously, the thing is, I will say there are very few people. This isn't like, obviously everyone likes to talk about cancelling and stuff. I haven't really seen anybody come out and say, like, cancel Silence of the Lambs.
No,
like,
nobody says cancel Silence of the Lambs. What they say is it's got a complicated legacy. That's the theory. Because here's the crucial
it's problematic.
Well, problematic, maybe. But the key thing is, it's why it maybe doesn't stray into like problematic or let's cancel or this viewing Silence of the Lambs in a new way, is because Dem's film adaptation is quite deliberate in its insistence that Buffalo Bill was only inspired by the abuse he suffered in his childhood and is not quote-unquote real transsexual. And, Lecter nods along when Clarisse says, there's no correlation between transsexualism and violence. That is basically the why, it can be interpreted. I guess people, maybe they don't pay attention to the lines, and maybe people would be like, they should have done a better job. But I'm like, it literally you have two characters stating that. And yes, you're right, when the line about the savage, like his pathology is 1,000 times more savage, bit of a slip up. But I think from what I've read from Dem, his intention wasn't to say that people who are transsexual are inherently violent because they are transsexual and or murderers or whatever. That's not what he was trying to. That's not what he was trying to say.
I think that's actually the other thing, which is a commonality, because I remember, I can't remember where it was. It was on some kind of forum, but basically a Catholic was pretty much making the standard, like, gay equals pedophile thing. And obviously the thing they were talking about was basically, they were, like, relating it to abuse. And basically somebody pointed out, like, do you not think it's kind of a commonality that men who are gay are more likely to maybe be confused about their sexuality if they are in a situation where their sexuality isn't accepted, and that could lead to them developing harmful. And basically, that's the point I mean. I was saying, like, do you not think it's possible if we accepted gay men that actually the number of gay men who engage in what we might call perversions, like harmful sexual acts, would be reduced? And obviously, that's kind of the thing. Like, basically. But yeah, the flip side is obviously, as long as, even if you make the argument that these kind of, the association between, like, say, things like somebody like Buffalo Bill dressing up and wanting to wear women's skin and him being a murderer comes from society's weird views about sexuality and gender, well, even still, it's perfectly legitimate for a film to portray that. And that's actually the final thing I did want to say. I think apart from anything else, this film, I feel like it does have a thematic reason for the character being a cross-dresser, and I think for that particular reason, like, even if
I was wondering about this. Does it have it? Because of course Clarice is a woman, and that's the central theme. She's a woman. I was thinking, I don't
does
think
that fit into
really,
it?
I don't think it really does have a connection, but you think it does?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I guess it is kind of. I think it probably is, in that they talk about. So one of the things is Hannibal Lecter literally says, like, he wants to be, he covets being a woman. And I would think, and obviously one of the other themes is the male gaze. So, like, when those two things are kind of together, and it's like they have this connection between, it's the thing you see every day is the thing you want to kill, and then they bring up the male gaze. And I was kind of thinking that there's surely a connection between the fact that you have all of these men in the film who are constantly looking at and staring at, and some might say coveting, Clarice. And then obviously you have Hannibal Lecter telling us, hey, the reason why he wants to dress up like a woman is because he covets women. I think that's what he was saying. He said, like, we dress up as we want the thing we covet. I can't remember.
Yeah.
He mentioned coveting anyway. And I feel like, I will admit, I wasn't really thinking to myself about, I guess it could be almost Freudian in, like, obviously we know, like, the whole idea of, like, Freudian, like, penis envy and that kind of stuff. Like, maybe there's an idea of perhaps one of the reasons why men abuse women and, like, abusive to women, obviously, and to doing the serial killer, that's pretty abusive, might be because they want women, and that he's kind of the radical expression of that, of wanting women so much that he wants to become a woman. I don't know. Like, I will say, I think it's one of those things where it adds a dimension to it without necessarily, I wouldn't say it has necessarily a clear thematic message, but I would say it seems to, to kind of add a dimension to it, is my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
Perhaps it could add a dimension, but I looked like Dem didn't say anything really about that.
Okay.
And yeah, I think it's, I think it's just an interesting kind of thing about how he's killing these women, and why is he doing this? I think obviously the film adaptation, it was adapted from something, so you have to ask the author of the book why he chose this killer. But yeah, I think it's the fact that he's making a suit of a woman's suit out of women, like, that's inherently, like, creepy. So I think that's really why he went down that line more than anything else.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I will say, I think given that a lot of this film is undeniably about sexism and, like, woman's role in the world, I think, I guess I would say maybe it's not necessarily a thematic thing, but I think there's got to be a sense in which the two things, the idea of having, like, him making a suit out of women in a film that's about sexism, there's got to at least be a degree to which it's informing it, I would think. Maybe I'm just, maybe I am wrong. Maybe it's just a case of he thought, oh, that's creepy, and then also decided to. But I would think those two things being together, there's got to be at least a point where, like, the wires were crossed
clear
mentally.
Connection. I don't think there's a clear connection, but maybe you're right.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to have you say, do an impression of him going, it rubs the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again.
That's the line I remember. I also like when he's like, would you fuck me? I'd fuck me. I always find it weird he has a really deep voice. Like, that's kind of funny with him being, a trans, pretend transsexual. But yeah, okay, so he has, like, a really weird way of saying it. I actually do really, like, it's funny. He's actually, I would argue, almost a more kind of interesting character than Hannibal Lecter, in that he sounds, like, really funny. He's got, like, he's like, he rubs the lotion on it rubs the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again.
That's good. That's actually good.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I will say this, he's kind of got a kind of patheticness to his voice, which actually I think makes him really
he's always on the verge of crying.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like, it rubs the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again.
I can't think. It kind of reminds me of, like, I feel like there's a comedian it reminds me of. I can't think of. It's kind of like a classic, like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking of, like, a sad version of Jerry Seinfeld. Like, what's the deal with airline food?
Okay,
it tastes so bad.
One other controversy to go through, which I found quite funny. In a 1992 interview with Playboy magazine, the feminist and women's rights advocate Betty Friedan stated, "I thought it was absolutely outrageous that Silence of the Lambs won 4, it actually won 5, Oscars. I'm not
Women
saying,
and maths, am I right?
yeah, no. I'm not saying that the movie shouldn't have been shown. I'm not denying that the movie was an artistic triumph, but it was about the evisceration, the skinning alive of women. That's what I found offensive, not the Playboy centerfold." I find that like funny for obvious reasons, because of course Clarice is the hero and she's a woman.
Yeah.
And of course, like she by saving women, that's literally what she's doing, and women are the victims. It's again because she's that they are the ones targeted the most by serial killers, obviously, and so yes, that's what she's doing. She's saving them So it's not really about no one's gaining pleasure or like, yes, I love the evisceration or the skinning alive of women. Like that's just bullshit. And of course she's doing it in Playboy. She's doing that interview in Playboy. Which,
I actually know who Betty Friedan is, and she's. See, I don't use this term in like a bad way, but I'd argue she's possibly kind of the quintessential second wave white feminist. I saw
that in the Wikipedia. I just glanced at it, and she's like one of the people that started that, the second wave.
Yeah. Because basically, so her whole thing was the idea of because in the first wave, feminism was to more of an extent kind of more inextricably attached to like the workers' rights movement in like the 1910s and stuff, whereas the second wave feminist, I'm speaking in generalities, which I think is the only way you can speak about it, was a lot more of like the 1950s housewife thing, and like basically how being a housewife sucks, which is a perfectly legitimate thing to complain about. But yeah, Betty Friedan, I think
so surface level.
Yeah, I think like her thing was basically she was a housewife who, I think as a housewife, I might be slightly wrong here, but I think pretty much as a housewife, she decided to write a book called The Feminine Mystique about how being a housewife sucked. And that was, and it's a very valid book, and I wouldn't say Betty Friedan.
I'm not saying she's not wrote about this analysis. It's fucking stupid.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. Like I think so. My attitude towards Betty Friedan, I would say in general, it really matters. Is I'd say she was very good at describing a specific scenario she was describing, but I'm also not surprised she's the kind of person who would go, "Ugh, women being murdered sounds like sexism." Without really appreciating how there could be plenty of, dimensions where that's actually being critiqued or commented on in an interesting way. But she is ultimately, she's the kind of woman who, she's a 1950s housewife. It's not surprising.
Unfortunate, that critique, I'd say. So I guess we're done. So let's conclude. Do you want to go first or shall I?
I think I'll go first.
Okay,
why not? So I will say this, okay? Yeah, okay. First of all, I'll say that you kind of have, in many ways, you've convinced me that this film is not as good maybe as I potentially thought, just because I think there are some issues with, I guess, the relationship between the logic of the film and then the characterization, and I think it's usually good when the characterization kind of drives the film, whereas I think in a lot of cases the priorities of the logic is to create a certain characterization, and we covered that with thinking, and I would say that's the main criticism. Like I said, it'd be quick. So, but I do think the thematic stuff is interesting. I'm caught between a high 8 and a low 9. So I wouldn't say like perfect, but I mean, a good thing. And yeah, it's mostly based on thing. But I think I'm going to go for a low, actually, I think I'll go for a low 9, but it's literally right on the threshold, like literally right on the threshold. So it's above Manchester by the Sea and below Blade Runner 2049.
Okay. I'll say, I think, it's an interesting movie, definitely very interesting, and we've discussed a lot about the themes and so on. And I'll just say what disappoints me is the plot could have been a bit better. Hannibal's motivation could have made a bit more sense. And I think the ending again was a bit disappointing. Like Hannibal Lecter escapes, and then you don't see him for the rest of the movie until the very end, of course, when he's about to kill the former warden of his prison. It's a bit shit. But yeah, overall, of course, this was a revolutionary movie. It's in terms of the main character and the role that she was in, and it's very well done, very well made. Of course, Hannibal Lecter became iconic, and with very good reason. It's just a fantastic performance from Anthony Hopkins, and that all adds itself up together. And I think this movie, it could have been amazing, it could have been great. It still is amazing, but I'm talking like amazing. Yeah, I'm going to give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. I've decided. I think, the thing I thought of was like Clarice being an FBI agent, being a heroine, is a message that, again, that knocks it down. Like, she can be a hero, but in the FBI, that kind of it doesn't really work for me. So that's why I'm going to put it down to an 8.5.
You know what, Luke? You were. I don't mind giving away the fact you were deliberating a bit, and I was about to offer my advice and say I think based on, I'd say you've had slightly more criticisms of the film than me. So I would say based on that, considering I was on the verge of giving it a high 8, it would make sense for you to give it an 8.5 because I said I didn't really care about the FBI thing. So yeah, makes sense. I think you made the right choice.
Because I'm more woke than you. That's why I care about the FBI.
You really
thing.
are.
Yeah.
I remember when you gave Dumbo a pretty bad score because it was racist, and I was like, I don't care.
I don't think I get this.
No, you didn't. You didn't give it a. I just think you. I felt like you gave it. I don't know. Maybe you gave it a 6. I felt like you gave it a 5 though.
I can't remember.
And your main reason was because you were like, it's pretty racist.
I don't think so. I genuinely don't think I remember that. But maybe I'll go back and listen. But anyway, yeah. What are we doing next week?
Next week, you know what? Actually, see, you mentioned it, and I meant to go check because obviously you
it's
moved
Happy
around.
Gilmore.
Oh yes,
Happy Gilmore, the 25
I'm so
year
excited.
anniversary of Happy Gilmore. Very different to this movie. So thank you for listening. We've been selecting.
Also classified as a horror.
Yeah, great.
Surprisingly.
We've been selecting and reflecting on Silence of the Lambs. One of the only 3 movies to win all 5 of the major Oscar awards. And join us next week for Happy Gilmore. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening and goodbye.
Goodbye.